Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Today we have my good friend Austin Zest, and we're going to be talking about, what shall we talk about today?
What up? Yeah, welcome to the podcast. That's the name of the podcast, the podcast. Man, we are sore today. We just went to boxing last night. That was kind of interesting, huh? We're doing Muay Thai boxing, and talk about controlling emotions and stuff and trying to one guy was sort of talking a little bit of crap to me and he said, hey, you're like knocking on the door or something. I mean, it was just like jabbing, like boxing. It's kind of different. So, but anyway, I lost it. I thought I took that as a challenge, took that as he was trying to, talk crap, right? And I just punched him in the head a few times, like actually really hard, and then he went over in the totally other direction, and then I kind of just so that's something that I know, like in my own life, I've struggled with sometimes with that kind of instant reaction thing, and there's not much you can do other than somebody else has to, because if you're wired that way, and I think everybody has that to some point, you have your kind of triggers, and I remember that too, like in 8th grade, people were bugging me with rubber bands, shooting rubber bands, because I was reacting to them, and they're like, hey, he keeps reacting, he keeps getting pissed. We're like, and then afterward, I threw the guy down, I choked him and threw him on the ground. Everybody saw, I got in trouble, but nobody messed with me after that. So sometimes it's like, I don't know, I don't even know where I'm going with that, but I did feel weird. I felt kind of bad about myself, and I talked to the guy afterward, and he's like, hey man, I kind of went crazy, sorry. Mil disculpes in Spanish,
That's good.
And we talk, of course, because I don't feel like, I kicked this guy's butt, he's a younger guy than me, and it wasn't like that at all. I kind of felt like, I should have kept it a little bit more cool and a little bit under control, but other than that though, it's so beneficial. But what do you think about all that emotional stuff?
Yeah, for sure. That's a big part of why I go and attend these classes as well. And I've been there now for the last 8 months, kind of more or less continuously. And I've seen this many times in myself and in others. That's part of the emotional component, of the mental training component of the sport, of combat sport, to know how to not react and how to not get triggered. You see that also on the highest levels of UFC type fighters. Either somebody gets cocky and kind of puts the hands down in order to try to trigger the other person, and sometimes that leads to them actually getting knocked out. Yeah. But it's also the practice of, when you get hit, to not lose the control and to not feed into the anger, but to remain calm and stick to the plan. Right. And so it's all good. That's what we all learn. That's oftentimes why people come there to the sport anyways, to learn how to utilize and manage their anger, right? But how to project that during, 4 or 5 rounds of 5 minutes, rather than to just lose it all and then it's kind of blown away in that sense. So we're all learning that the most important thing is that we say, it was a mistake, I'm sorry, and then it's all good. That's what I'm thinking. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to that too. Like Mike Tyson did semen retention for 5 years, for sure. And he won all those fights. And I've done semen retention for quite a long time too, and I think all that you become, I don't know, I used to think that the semen retention, that was so necessary for you had to do it all the time, and it became like a religion, because you get power from it. You get power and strength, and you get kind of this ridiculous strength that doesn't even make sense. I'm not even like a big guy. I'm pretty skinny and stuff, and but that does give you an X factor, and but that guy, I mean, he looked a little bit scared, and I was kind of like, oh geez, I didn't even know what happened, but it was probably a combination of a few of those things: high testosterone, working all day, all that adds up, and somebody just tries to test you. And here in Peru, we're gringos down here, right? We get tested a lot sometimes. At least I have, and that, you get a certain, you're like, hey, I don't know. So it worked out fine. It ended up being fine, But that's just learning those boundaries too with people, and not going too far to the extreme. So maybe you were kind of like a giver a lot, as or like in your childhood or whatever, you thought that you had to give to make friends and stuff, and then you end up, being too nice kind of, and then people take advantage of that, and then that creates this kind of anger over the years, and then it's like, just because people don't reciprocate the way, that they do, like, that's why you and I are good friends, because it's like we've really like kept it on a very, like, that's what Alex Hermosius said. He said that too, like, if you're a giving person and stuff, don't change that about yourself necessarily. Find other people who are like you, and then you'll have friends for life, instead of trying to be like those other people who, always trying to get something, always trying to, make a deal and get, yeah. So I think a lot of, yeah, man. Nobody, I don't know. The world is like, we're in survival. And Joe Dispenza always talks about that, survival, right? Like, he's always like, hey, we're in survival mode, and most people are in survival mode. And I read his books when I was a kid, like 18 years old. So 19 years old, I had a job at Pizza Hut. And I remember, dude, I mean, really, I was like popping pills still and just kind of like struggling all this stuff. But I was still like, something was really getting through, like his books. His first book, Dr. Joe Dispenza's first book called Evolve Your Brain. I was 18 years old, 19 years old maybe, got my first job at Pizza Hut, and I was reading that book. And I didn't know how to read that good even. I mean, I did, but I wasn't, didn't have enough attention span to read the whole thing. But I read like pages at a time, and it changed my entire life. I remember driving in my car, and I would pull up my music all the way where I had before. Maybe I didn't want to put the music loud, because I was afraid what the people next to me were thinking. I lost all that. I completely was free, and it changed my life completely. And I don't think I was ever been the same since. Even though I had my ups and downs and serious downs and stuff through all that, something still kept sticking there. Like, hey, there's a way to actually live without being so self-conscious and in that survival mode, worrying about what everybody else is thinking about you all the time. Because it's like, that becomes a hell. That becomes a prison that we gain into. And that book at 19 years old really helped me a lot. Like, it really, it was just like talking about this stuff, stuck in survival mode. We are stuck in this survival mode. A deer gets chased by a lion or a puma or whatever, and its heart starts racing and it runs and it has the adrenaline rush. But then 20 minutes later, it's sitting in the grass relaxed because it goes away. That survival. Us as humans, that does not go away. It's the mind doesn't know the difference. The body doesn't know the difference between what your memory brings up again. So if you have a difficult circumstance, you bring it up in your mind, your body hits adrenaline, you think you're right there, you had a tragic event or an embarrassing event, your palms start sweating and everything, and then you're there again, and then you keep repeating that over and over in your mind, and then that's what Joe Dispenza talks about. That's what the cycle of sickness and illness and mental illness keep coming, repeating themselves over and over again. I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Definitely. And you know what the deer also does after being chased by the lion? It shakes.
Exactly.
The zebras, all the animals that are considered prey animals, grass-feeding prey animals, they shake, they let it out. And that's exactly what we've done yesterday with the sparring. That's why I believe this is such an important practice.
Totally.
Not only do you learn how to stretch, how to open your hips, which is a very important area, because from that does not only come your sexual energy, but also your balance.
Yeah.
Like your stance in life, literally.
Yeah.
Right? So that's very, very important. And I've seen how flexible you are still, and I know you've trained your legs like a wild man. So that's very good. But the point being, the deer shakes, and it shakes off the tension in the body that comes from being in the survival mode.
Yeah.
This is something that a lot of people are not doing. I just wanted to point that out as well.
That's right. Yeah, like my, fiance who's from the Andes of Peru and grew up in a very survival. Well, I mean, her parents pretty much grew up from the mountains, like really came from that. So like they're like first generation living in a big city, which is like 40,000 people, which is still pretty considered, kind of, I don't want to use, it's still like stuck in a certain kind of survival way. It's not everything's super, super advanced here. it's good enough. I don't want to say bad things, but you get my point, right? It's so that survival mentality I saw is serious, and you see that here in the town that we live in. It's really everybody's like in the survival mode. You can't give in that, so everybody's like, I'm gonna get 50 cents from this guy, and like they think they won the lottery, because they rip you off on the taxi for 25 cents, but that's survival, and we can't. We stuck, and not just people here. It's all over the world, in the Western countries too, in the United States. People, there's all these types all over the place, right? But it makes me wonder if the entire humanity is we've been put in this place to where we're like in a constant state of survival, fear, lack, and then we can't grow, and because we're stuck in this cycle. Oh, I gotta get the, pain. So anyway. That's why I love Joe Dispenza's teachings and in those books, because he really actually. A lot of people think it's New Age, it's a cult, and all this stuff. It's like no. This is real stuff, and they use science. They use real that's true self-empowerment. That's real self-empowerment. The difference between that and religion is religion teaches you to find something outside of yourself. And that's super blaspheming to a lot of people, like a lot of Christians and stuff. And I don't know why, because the Bible talks about that all the time throughout the Bible. For some reason, pastors don't really teach it, that you have the power within you. When your eye is open, you can call that maybe your third eye. Jesus talks about that. Your whole body will be filled with light. Like, what is that? That sounds really New Age. That sounds like Hindu, if you ask me. So like, what is up with this just constantly putting humanity down? Is that the time we're in, blah, blah, blah? Well, I don't know, but I don't know, because I think that people, it's like work. It takes work to wake up and to, and to get out of these habits and these survival mechanisms and these traumas and these family, these things that our family put on us over generations and generations, and these cycles that we follow. There's a way to break out of it, and I think it actually can be way quicker and way easier than people think. You just gotta sit with yourself for a little bit, do some meditation, and don't be afraid to look within a little bit and look at those parts that maybe anxiety comes up, so then you run away from that, you flee from that, right? Yeah. But maybe just beyond that anxiety, that what seems so scary, like the Wizard of Oz, right? Like, I don't know if you've seen the Wizard of Oz. It's a very famous movie, and but they get to this metropolis or whatever, and then there's they enter the door, and there's a big scary thing. There's this big scary creature. It looks like a ghost, and it's gigantic. But it was really a man behind the curtain. It's just a man behind the curtain, and they pulled down the curtain. It was just some guy controlling the mechanism with all the scariness. So what if that's like that? Your anxiety and all that stuff. It really seems like this big scary thing, but underneath it, and you look underneath it, that's where your freedom is, potentially.
And this is where knowledge has real value. In my opinion, there's a piece of knowledge that I would like to offer, our viewers right now. We get to a place of self-absorption when we feel out of balance, when we feel that we're not happy, when we feel that we're not getting what we need in life. Mm-hmm. Right. Our energy tends to be drawn or absorbed within ourselves in the same way as we were talking about animals before. When an animal is sick, they tend to isolate and they tend to rest. Yeah. And they tend to not eat and not procreate and not all of these things, so that the energy is being contained within the organism and can be used for healing.
Interesting.
And for humans, it's the same thing. When we feel we are not getting what we need, and oftentimes it can just be having psychological reasons for ingesting bad nutrition that makes you feel bad, that makes you look at your body after certain years or decades, and you're like, I don't really like what I see. I don't really like how that feels to live in this body. And that tends to have the energy being absorbed within yourself, right? Also, when you feel mentally or emotionally you're not quite getting what you need, people then tend to go into those introspective, depressive states, and it has a beneficial reason. The reason for that, the intention of that behavior is positive. Mm-hmm. The intention of that behavior is basically that you get to rest, you get to isolate yourself from other people, to really figure out what's happening. In the same way as the hurt or wounded animal isolates in order to rest and heal, we tend to do the same. But we don't quite this is exactly what I said, where the piece of knowledge can be valuable. Once we see that humans have the tendency, when we are not doing well, to isolate from other people and absorb the energy within ourselves. Once we see that, we can make the conscious choice to act contrary to that inclination that we have, meaning that we give more, right? And that's a piece of knowledge that's also valuable to understand, that we can only get so far by looking within and working on ourselves or obsessing about ourselves. At some point, the transformation really starts when we feel, okay, I don't have enough to give, but that was a manifestation or an effect of years and years and years of basically just trying to fill myself first without really giving to other people, right?
Dude, that is so deep. That is so deep. How many people do that, right? Like, they don't fill their own, their themselves first. They're constantly giving, and then they neglect their own selves. You know, I think a lot of mothers have that problem, right? And then they get that's why they always say the good die young. You know, I think there's some deep significance in that. People who are giving so much, and then they're not really taking care of themselves, and that's where illnesses come from. Sure. And all that, and that's why it's there's this whole thing in society. It's not good to be selfish. Well, it's and you look at the people who are selfish in society, whether they're good people or not, they do seem a lot more content, a lot more happy. You know what I mean? Like, you can judge people, CEOs, let's say, right? They have a bad connotation, or I don't know. Criminals, we've talked about that before, like successful criminals and stuff who live life based on their terms. You can say whatever you want, whether that's right, wrong, or what, but they're definitely living in a way that's very true to themselves, at least in that time in their life, and there's something to learn from that. If we're constant. So yeah. Anyway, that's kind of going off track from what you were saying. That point that you made. To fulfill yourself first before giving to others, and then it becomes a natural thing. Like, you want to give because you have too much energy inside of you. It's too much. It's overflowing. That's when you give. But you gotta take some time first. You gotta take some time for yourself for a while, and get there. And that's what's happening with our, with your business, start kind of slowly with mine too. And it's a lot more work than you think. That's what we were talking about earlier. Starting these things, it's so much more work than you actually think to start a business and all that. But you got to be ready first,
Yeah, and why is that? Because you should have to give, or not should, but you give so much into it until you really have a strong presence of all of that, until somebody who sees you and interacts with your business is very convinced. Right, and that means setting up quite a few systems and a certain basic level of professionality that when a person interacts with you, they're like, okay, this person, look at what we would do if we would go to a car dealership, right? And we sense the salesperson is kind of new. We're like, is that really going to be the right recommendation? Right. So we have the same psychology.
Right.
When we go to a business or to a service provider, somebody who wants to help us, we want to see that they are very certain that they can help us. And where does the certainty come from?
Right.
Well, you can fake it until you make it, and that's a beautiful way to do that.
Yeah.
But you can also earn it by actually preparing in a way that the whole experience for the person feels convincing and prepared and well prepared. And so you made a great point about the selfishness earlier. Basically, the other side of what I was saying, basically, and both of that are important. I think we should give young people in society the opportunity and the space to be selfish for a time.
Yeah.
Because as a young person, in order to find your place in society, you need to be selfish. In a way. Self-centered in a way. Centered in yourself. But there's also balance to not be self-absorbed and to guide the selfishness. Because there are selfish behaviors where it's about taking from others.
Right.
We've spoken about promiscuity a lot, and you helped me completely, getting over that and getting out of that and seeing for what it is.
Yeah, right. Oof.
Right?
Yeah,
So
that's a big one, man. Yeah.
So there's there are selfish behaviors that we have to point out, but the point that I'm making is, in my opinion, we should give young people the space to be selfish, to independize oneself from the parents, and making it okay as a societal value of, in the first 5 years after the child leaves the home, they might be struggling a little bit. Maybe we can't expect too much contact from them, or too much giving back, or them coming over every weekend to kind of help us out like they did.
Right.
I think that's very normal, and I think it should be made normal as a societal value, because I think it leads to stronger members of society later on. But there are basically two sides to it. One of that is, when we absorb, or when the energy gets self-absorbed, we tend to get unhappy, and we tend to get only concerned with how do I make myself happy, which leads to more unhappiness. And then when the tendency is to then go even further into self-absorption, it leads to a lot of entitlement, and it also leads to a lot what, in the United States, can be seen, that people treat customer service, people or waiters in a restaurant or in a coffee shop in Starbucks, poorly. Because they're basically just crying for help. They're basically just saying, I am so dissatisfied with my own life. Let me tell you how dissatisfied I am with this small little detail about my flat white coffee that you didn't mention. And they make this whole scene. And we know
Sure.
the stereotype of that.
Yeah.
It's really people who are hurting.
Right.
It's a cry for help. That's what that is. But they can't really articulate that. And part of that is because they are probably so much in survival mode, have been selfish so much, and the energy gets contained within themselves. And they miss the piece that at this point, they don't get any further by being selfish. That's the balance that we were trying to articulate.
Right.
So to give so much to other people that you lose yourself, that's not the way.
Right.
But when you start out in life to be selfish first, in order to find your specialization and your place in society, so that other people value you and the time that you can bring to the marketplace, which comes from specialization.
Yeah, right.
But then pivoting it back into giving.
Yeah, man, that was a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I do feel like in the United States, and maybe like we've had that a lot. And I'm very grateful for my parents, who really supported me in kind of not everything I did. I did a lot of bad things in my life too, but like they kind of let things just play out. Like I remember my dad always saying like, hey, I know you'll figure it out at some point, and it's like, and that was probably difficult to see that, me and some, doing some shady things and doing some, in some difficult positions. But I'm so glad that I had that. I'm so glad that I had that freedom to just explore all these different avenues and figure out and really screw up a lot of times, to really learn. So I'm 32 years old, and I feel like mentally I'm a lot older, and like spiritually and emotionally, I'm working on that. I'm working on getting more control on that, but that taught so much. So I think it depends too, economy, so here where we live here in Peru, it's a much different thing in the United States or in Germany, where you leave, you don't see your family for a couple of times, and it's okay. You don't feel bad. There's not this guilt trip that puts on you. Here in tribal society, pretty much still, that's not the case. If you don't call, if you don't show up at the gatherings, people start quitting. That's kind of their dynamic, and I wonder if I've been trying to figure this out since I've lived here, what is that all about? Why is that when, I go to a restaurant for a week, every day, and then I don't go for a month, and then they really feel sad that I don't show up. I don't know if it's because I think what it is here, people like the same thing over and over, like not much changes here. And this is Peru, by the way, the Andes Mountains, a small town, 40,000 people. And that's okay, and that's kind of a beautiful thing too in its own way. And I realize that it's like the thing that I want to get into though with you. How do you not let other people affect you? So right now, for example, down below my apartment, there's a restaurant, and I'm sure this happens all over the world. Actually, it doesn't really matter where. I'm sure this type of thing happens. So I've been going to I was eating food down there. Every day, kind of a nice family, and they were cooking, making it. We stopped going because I had to take care of my parasites and start just eating beans and rice for a while. But anyway, they think, I don't know, Flora went down there, my fiance went down, and then like they were super cold to her because we hadn't gone there for a while. So they think we're going to other restaurants and stuff, and like they get jealous. Like, how do you not let that affect you? Because right now it's affecting me. Like, I don't even want to go in there, even if it's very convenient. I don't want to like face it. Like, that's, to me, that's so annoying. And so, but what do you think that is? What is that dynamic? Like, what is? And have you experienced that here, or have you experienced that in other places? I know in the United States that's very rare. I don't even think it's so big and so vast. Maybe in a small town, but people get it. They don't make you. They don't really do that there. But I think, like, my mom told me, like, in Canada they do that a little bit. It's a small. So in United States it's very independent, and they don't. I never really experienced that. Not really. Barely. Not like to the extent here. I don't show up to my in-laws' house, I can really feel the heaviness. I'm like, why is that? It's so weird. Like, I don't get it. We're adults. We have things to do. We can't just hang out. But I wonder if it's that pain, that's internal pain, and they feel so bad in their lives. They don't have enough going on, so they, What do you think about that on a psychological standpoint?
It is the pain, and I think the way to not let that affect you is by empathy. By actually really understanding what that likely is. We've talked a lot about the family dynamics here, and we talked a lot about the lack of psychological education, and we also talked a lot about the lack of understanding of psychological dynamics and how to relate to each other in a healthy and mature way. We also got to consider, you in the United States, me in Europe, we had centuries upon centuries upon centuries and generations upon generations of people figuring out first the basics of life, machinery and everything since the 1800s. And since then we had a lot of time to explore, and academia, books, everything helped us in the Western world to have a more accurate understanding about human psychology and how to relate to each other, how to live to each other. Plus, exactly what you said, people understand that if you go somewhere else, it doesn't mean that's because of you, it's because of my preference of I just had to take care of my parasites. So what I'm saying is the following, the empathy. When people grew up in these family dynamics where guilt and making somebody feel guilty is the main way how you get to affect somebody else's behavior, which here it is a pattern. And they live that out, usually, in my opinion, that's what I see, because they've been made to feel this way. A lot of people here carry this deep wound of being left, of being used, of being promised something and then not delivered on, of being cheated, so to speak. And that's the same wound. They can't even help it. They don't even do this consciously. It just feeds into this deep wound of like, man, my father was leaving when I was young, or, over and over and over in business, being taken advantage of. A lot of people here have been taken advantage of because the culture of like taking from somebody else and ripping each other off is so ingrained here. So it feeds into this deep wound. I had that as well when I was cleaning up a few stock items that of the previous business, or rather a few items that I've bought in order to hedge against the uncertainty, like axe blades and machetes and all of that. And then I went back to the same stores and sold it back to them, which was an interesting experience. And I realized that as well. I was giving a few playing cards, right? Just as gifts, or like little gifts that I had that wasn't really that much worth in terms of money, but I used that in order to, build the relationships with people. It's like, you buy that from me, here is a little gift. And I had the wildest reactions of people getting like so hurt when I wasn't giving them the gift, but all of their sisters who were working next to them were getting them. And they were so in this old pain of like, she's getting it and I'm not getting it, but like on like a real level. And I'm like, lady,
right, it's not a joke.
I'm like, lady, I just bought a 25 cent of ice cream for the other people. You get one too. Relax. But
these are adults. These are adults.
But I also realized that in the same way as you said before with being disrespected, that's part of your wound. We can talk about that if you're willing to. And I have my own wounds as well. Being disrespected is part of that as well. Being not being talked over. I had that a lot in my past, where I was just saying something and I wasn't really convinced, and the people were just talking over me. And I'm like, what the fuck? It's like, I was just saying something. What is this? Not standing up. So we all have our wounds, and we have to understand with empathy, in my opinion, that's the way to cure that these people are just being unconsciously reminded of their wounds that they have experienced. Of like, I kind of like this couple, there's this Westerner with his fiance, it's kind of something new, and now they're leaving. It must be because I suck, it must be because the food sucks, it must be because there's something wrong with me. It feeds into the same wound. And so in my opinion, from your perspective, just show them love.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. But yeah, that's right. And there's a lot of, I have to do a lot of explaining sometimes to people, and to try to sit down, with, my fiance's parents, right? And I have to really sit them down and really explain, like a father would a child sometimes. And I hate to say it like that. And it's like, that's sort of the thing. And it's like, but then I got to remember, I've been in that position too. I've felt that way too, and I've probably done similar things. And if that, so I gotta. The thing that I've realized is that when you're to not be too judgmental, and to try to see yourself in this.
Oh, for sure.
Because it's like, okay, maybe I would be similar. I don't know. Maybe in some situation, it's like. But I think it's such a different mentality because, in the United States, we don't take those things as personal too much. Because there is a distance between, when it's a big city, you might not ever see the people again, or people are always traveling. There's just a totally different dynamic. And there's a lot more independence in it. But the contrary side, there's a lot of loneliness and isolation in that. And there's a lot more drug addiction and stuff. I don't know. There's a lot of alcoholism and problems here too. So I wonder, you know what I mean? There's a lot of alcoholism, a lot. And I wonder if that is like a big effect too. The emotional imbalance, so many men drinking all the time, they never got to figure out their emotions, so they bring that in. So the women have to be strong and more mature. You don't see too many women drinking here. No. You know what I mean? Like hardly. So they have to kind of step into a male role in a lot of ways, and I'm sure that creates a lot of instability and stuff. So and I know this is all over the world. We're not just picking on Peru. We live here, and we just kind of see we see this in the United States, the divorce and all that stuff is catastrophic, and it's huge, So, but very interesting, man. These are really. But what I wanted to say, seeing that within myself, seeing these issues, seeing those issues within myself that I've done to other people too, and try to realize that the difficult thing though is it's uncomfortable. That's, I think, the biggest thing. We're all running away from an uncomfortable situation, so we would rather avoid it. And then when we avoid these situations that we know, the right thing to do, go in there, order some food, talk to them, hey, I've been sick, it's not a big deal, and just say, hey, I love your cooking, there wasn't anything wrong with it, but just to confront the situation, which I've gotten better and better at over the years. But I used to really avoid a lot of stuff, and I still do sometimes. There's some things it's like I just don't. It's like, but the more that you do confront those situations, you do get better at it, and you start to grow. I know you're actually quite good at that, Florian. Very good. Yeah. So I know but confronting these situations it's so important. As a man and as a woman too, just as a human in general, it's that is a skill that we need to learn, to be able to be uncomfortable, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and then you start to grow. And I've really learned that since living here, and really, because I've had to put boundaries up, I've had to grow up so much, and it's really been like a school. Yeah. This University of the Andes Mountains of Peru, we've literally on a spiritual level, on a physical level, on a mental level, sure, all on an emotional level. Man, I am a completely different person. I'm still kind of the same guy, but I've grown up so much in the years that I've lived here, and I see now the purpose of living here on a spiritual level, and it's really helped me grow. And it just goes back to all that stuff. manifestation, Joe Dispenza, Neville Goddard, that manifestation, the Elmer Lockhart Jr. channel, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. So we are pretty much attracting what we are in these situations. And it's like, I see that now. Then you don't become the victim as much anymore. Then you can kind of see it. Also, these negative, uncomfortable situations as a positive and as a chance to really lift up your soul and just like, yeah, man. So interesting, huh?
Man, there are 3 points that I would like to unpack. First, be it, and then you become it.
Right.
That is the way how we're moving right now, and this is so interesting. That works in the positive and in the negative. In your example, let's unpack that real quick. The restaurant owner who has potentially, I'm just assuming, I don't want to speak anything over that person, but what I see is quite likely there that they had the same wound of abandonment. People leave because they felt that they were not good enough. Maybe their older brother or older sister was preferred, and they were given just the second-hand clothing. There are lots of things, together with the family guilt and everything that's happening here. A lot of ways where people feel that. And here's what's so interesting. Here's what's truly interesting, and I would love for you listeners to understand this. The person lives with the belief of, I'm not good enough, and that's why my first wife or my first husband left me with a child. I wasn't good enough, and that's because my father left. I wasn't good enough because, etc., etc. And now they're having this belief and they're projecting that onto you. And that makes you feel like you don't want to go back there.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's the belief that manifests your reaction because she was so cold or so triggered in herself, and we're like, well, I don't want to make her feel bad. I don't want to go back there ever. But if she were just not having this belief, wouldn't react to that, you would be coming back. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
That's the manifestation.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the manifestation with cheating and being cheated on. Where some people are like, well, I constantly got to check whether he has somebody else. And that's the same neediness that then leads to the person actually considering, well, to her, I could do that. She would stay anyways.
Yeah,
It's the belief that manifests the behavior so that other people react to that. By me having the belief of like, what I say is not really that important, I'm not so sure. I talk in this kind of lower voice, and other people sense that I'm not really there while I'm talking, so they're like, well, I guess I jump in then, because he's not really there. And then I was like, why is this person talking over me?
Right.
It's the belief that manifests that.
Right.
And there was another point that I wanted to unpack, but I think that's it. I lost the third point, but that's all right.
Well, there was a lot in there, man. Yeah. Very fascinating stuff. Very fascinating stuff here on all that. I was just thinking too, like depression too. I want to just cover that a little bit because I was really struggled with that in my 20s, on and off. Some might say that was manic depression, and I kind of had some of those qualities, but a lot of that has resolved itself in my 30s here. A lot of that was because I didn't have my needs met properly, and I realized, I wonder how much of the mental I know there's real mental illnesses and stuff that exist, but what is the solution there? You know what I mean? Like, to really, like, what are the real needs that people are not being? Is it just, oh, you have this, so here's a pill, and that's it's like, what if it's way deeper than that? Because there's issues here and stuff, alcoholism, and I'm sure there's like all these kind of undiagnosed, mental illnesses in Peru, and but like mental illness is not really a thing. And I wonder how much power we put into that, because I remember like with the kind of, when they say, hey, you're diagnosed, you have this mental illness, then you kind of, now I have an identity. It's like, okay, I have this, I have this, now I have, and then you kind of then use it as a crutch. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that can justify, this and that, these behaviors, right? And then there's a little bit of a relief in that, But the problem with that is then you keep kind of establishing that. You keep reigniting that. And I don't know, it becomes like a self-fulfilled prophecy, if that makes sense, And I know we've both, we've been good friends over the years and kind of have helped each other navigate through a lot of that. And a lot of that was just, we had these cycles and these patterns, and then one thing would trigger this other thing. So you might do something that will make you feel depressed again. And I remember that. I remember like, hey, I'd be happy, and then I'd do something that would make me feel bad. And I'd be like, well, what was the point of that? That's because I've trained myself. And maybe the other generations, you know what I mean? Society, you keep retraining yourself and rewiring your brain over and over. So then it solidifies, yes, I have this mental illness because you kept feeding it. You kept feeding it. And then what I realized, what's helped me to kind of get out of that is getting more of my needs met. And in my 30s too, I think it started to help. My aunt would always tell me that I had deep depression. She was worried about me, and she said, just hold on, through your 20s. A lot of us have that. Just wait until your 30s. And I wish that message would go more to the youth, because it's like, instead we're saying, oh, you have this issue. Oh, you think you're a girl, you're really a guy. That's why you have this mental illness and blah, blah, blah. Like that's, obviously we're not saying that, but like I'm talking about a lot of society in the last 10 years, let's say, has really told young people that there's something wrong with them. Nothing wrong with the society, hey, everything's fine. But like, there's something wrong with you, and when there's probably nothing wrong with them necessarily, mentally and all this stuff. They just don't have their needs met, either. So that's something I realized, like in my 30s, I barely struggle with that, the depression, as much. I do sometimes, and I have had that, but it's so much, I fight through it so much more, and a lot of it was like a physical issue too. I had those parasites eating through all my nutrients and vitamins, and I had a bacterial infection like from salmonella at the same time for 2 years. So I was tired, and I kind of felt depressed of symptoms because I was so tired, and I realized, gosh, how many people have that issue? How many young people just simply have been eating, drinking Coca-Cola and eating crappy foods, and then they say, oh, you have depression. It's like, come on. Maybe it's just like, change your diet, get the worms out, sit in the sun for 10 minutes, stop putting guilty pressure on each other. It's like, I can see the solutions. And I think that was a lot of my depression, because I had moments, as a youth, where I had great, just like, that's where they would say the manic phase, right? I was just like, everything was amazing, right? Everything was incredible, and I could see a much better world. And I'm like, what are we doing, guys? And I grew up in California, a beautiful place, Southern California. It's like people die freaking trying to get there, literally. It's not night, it really is. But people were just like stuck in their own type of survival, kind of like here in a weird way. But it was different. But it was like, man, people are struggling all over the world, and I would love to hear from other cultures. How is this in China? How is this in the Middle East? How are they navigate all this? Because I don't really hear that much from other. That's something that we should explore in the next episode.
Yeah, definitely, and it would be amazing to bring some other guests on that that, because what I see, especially in the Western world, and now the contrast that we've experienced here, is exactly what you said: the principle of balance, and the principle of being out of survival and of having your needs met. But here again, having your needs met can lead to this selfish kind of fulfillment thing of, what do I need? Do I need more clothes and a better car and more women and like more money, and I need to travel more? I need 10,000 people in a stadium to look at me and be completely quiet while I speak, so then I know that I am worth something and that I'm seen and that I have the intent. So like where meeting the needs, yes, the real needs, not necessarily the needs of the ego. But the needs that present themselves oftentimes give us pointers towards the real needs that we have. And that's part of my work, what I would love to bring to people. I see that I think we need more elders in the community who can consult with people. I have the intention of becoming that person, or rather stepping into that position also sooner than later, not necessarily being an elder by age, but being an elder, but being a consultant to people, because I've concerned myself over the last decade really about human psychology, and I can give something to people. I can explain these patterns and help them see some things that they don't quite see. And I would love for us to have that as a societal value of, for example, hey, we're a young couple, we can't quite figure that out. And you go to a person, I'm not saying come to me, I'm saying go to a person who knows, whether that's me or somebody else. I think we should have more of these people in society that we can consult with. In the same way as you bring your car to a mechanic. I mean, if you know how to fix a car, you can do it yourself. But generally, you know, if it seems complicated, you bring it in. And if the relationship seems complicated, or your depression seems complicated, or the family situation seems complicated, you should bring yourself in and then get a checkup and get a third opinion. Right? So that's really what I see. And in terms of balance, a lot of that starts on the physical level. You know, the food that you ingest, not putting other people down and not being put down yourself so much. For a lot of people that keeps running throughout the day, these foreign thoughts or these family thoughts that other people talk to them about, and they put them in that same position, especially when you stay in the same place, very close to your parents. That's why it's important for young people to completely leave the culture and go somewhere else and travel. I would love to bring an initiative here as well, because then people can come back to this town with the learnings that they've made overseas. But that would then also require the families to be willing to do that and seeing value in that. And I think it needs a complete reshaping of societal values. And how do we do that? How would we do that? By seeing
Peru, by the way. Peru,
by seeing that people would actually feel better by doing that. You can only convince people by them actually feeling, oh, I'm doing better than I was before. That makes sense to me. And so then secondly, also the piece of knowledge of human energy and human balance. For a lot of people, if I put myself in their shoes here, the common person where we live, and probably in other places too, so we are not coming from a place of judgment here. It's my speciality to figure these things out. People get up and then they have a few hours before they get hungry for the first time. Then ingest a very carbohydrate-rich diet, and they don't have a professional work usually. They just help each other out, which is beautiful. Trade favors, and then somebody needs, their wall fixed or their roof fixed, and then they have a little work here, a little bit of, most people here have some transportation, so they offer taxi services throughout the day. But the food they ingest, listening to the radio constantly, all of that plants these foreign thoughts into your heads, and being out of balance, not knowing the value of exercise, not knowing the value of standing up to your family and actually saying we don't put each other down, we lift each other up. That's a big part of the depression too. And but the depression really is individual for the person. For you, that is likely a very different cause than for a lot of people here. I really see that for a lot of people here, it's these two things. It's bad nutrition and parasites, like very visceral, physical things of just the body lacking nutrients. Although you're so full, you still feel empty, and especially emotionally empty, because you still carry all of these unfulfilled desires of wanting to experience something else, but then you can't because your mom is sick, because she's also eating badly, and then she needs you to stay, and you're being guilted into staying, and then you're like, I should have, and all of these psychological forces come together. So it's nutrition and the psychological forces, in my opinion, that contribute to a lot of depression here. But on the other hand, there are also people here who are not like that. And I would love to make that a case study also, so I don't come here and put myself on the pedestal of saying like, look at me, I got my life figured. I think that will be limited in effectiveness. What I really would love to do is to showcase other people in this society from this town who have done it successfully, who live healthily, who choose to eat the foods that are local here. I don't prescribe a nutrition that comes from Germany and we all eat freaking bockwurst and Weisswurst and drink beer or whatever.
United States is worse.
I'm not even saying that. But eat the foods that grow in your garden here and not the ones that come from the fucking frying pan, for example. And people who live by these principles, I would love to utilize my increasingly growing marketing skills and capacities and articulation skills to showcase some of that, because that's, in my opinion, the way how we can reshape societal values, not by me coming in. And that's Last point to that, that's also part of what we said in the beginning with the boxing incident.
Yeah.
A lot of people here not only have this family trauma, but they also have this deeply visceral, almost on a like gene level kind of generational trauma of like some superior kind of white person coming in and making you feel put down.
Yeah.
It's also something to really, really, really be considerate about in our position, I feel.
Definitely is a good point. That is a very good point, and that's been part of actually the struggle of living here in Peru as an American. You get like kind of some people who are either there's a few different types of people in South America when you're a gringo and you live, you're from Europe or from the United States. There's a person who sees you and wants to try to be your friend and try to take advantage of you, and they'll be like super interested in you and asking you all these questions. And when you first get here, you might be, oh, cool, people are so nice. But then you realize that there was some other. They're trying to do something. They're trying to get some sort of something out of you. They also might look at you as like they're way out of the situation. Like, okay, this guy, he's white, he's from Germany, he's from America, he's got connections, guaranteed.
Must be a millionaire.
Must be a millionaire, must have rich family, which is totally not the case. We don't, we don't come from millionaire families. We don't. We come from like working class, and it's like, it was brutal. We didn't have all these situations. I think it's a lot more easy to be poor here in Peru, in Cusco, Peru, than up there. Heck yes, it is. Much easier because it's accepted. You can pretty much, like you say, relax here, and it's almost better to be poor here than rich, I feel like. Because like when you're rich, I'm not saying better, but you get my point. It's almost like, people, you have to sort of like not be secluded in a lot of ways. Pretend to be something just sort of, and then the other type of person, is the person who sees you and is like, they're looking at you like they're afraid of you, and I didn't like that. I was kind of, because I'm a pretty, I think I'm a nice guy. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I'm not as nice as I think I am. But but anyway, I mean, I just wanted. I wanted people to at least relax around me. I didn't want people, and then I realized when I was being too nice, then even those people saw that as an opportunity a lot of times. So that made me more cold and kind of more tough, and now I'm kind of an asshole, But sort of that is kind of necessary for growth as a man too. You can't be, if you want to get into business and stuff, you gotta learn how to stand up for yourself and be strong with people. It's like we're not in a world where everybody's pineal glands are open and we're all, drinking ayahuasca every day and we're connected on this super deep, high vibe level, ninth dimension level, and we can see the energy of the plants, and we're not there. We're reducing ourselves. We're being reduced from outside forces as well. So that's the way I look at it. We're all in this too. Black, white, Mexican, Italian, European, South American, North American. Like, I see us all, we're fighting the same battle. It's a battle for salt. There's chemicals in the salt, chemicals in the toothpaste, chemicals in Coca-Cola. Like you said, the oil that they use to cook the fried chicken and everything. Dude, just those four things alone, most people consume on a daily basis. That closes your pineal gland, that closes you from a different way of thinking, in a different way of, it's like the antenna. Your pineal gland is your antenna that if it's, corroded and dirty with all this stuff, the antenna's down. You don't have an antenna anymore. You're not able to absorb other signals for other ideas, for higher vibe ideas, not to sound super new age and hippie, but like really, it's like a science. It's the human body. We live in the most technologically advanced system that's ever been created, but we're operating at a fraction of that. And that is probably done by design. So that's the real issue that we have going on. I don't care if you're American, if you're South American. That's why I say, like, we're all kind of, this is what I don't understand. People, we're all fighting this one battle Because in the United States, it's probably worse, way worse, the food. McDonald's and GMO and genetically modified. It's like, at least people here, we have farmers markets every day and we have access to it's quite easy. And a lot of people, you can see it in their eyes. The Andean people who work every day and they have their potato, you know, the women who have the potatoes over there, you know, and they have big smiles on their face and they look healthy and they're probably 70 years old and they look like they're 40, you know. So that also exists here as well on that side of it. So it's just, we all need to wake up, and you know, my channel is the pineal gland awakening, and that's just something that I think would be a big help for a lot of people to figure out how to clean that up a little bit, you know, clean that up, and at least to be able to start. It doesn't mean you have a full-blown awakening and you see angels and you're like, you know, like those crazy, you know, kundalini awakenings and people are shaking. I'm not talking about like crazy stuff like that. I'm just talking about clean that thing little by little, stop consuming the certain things that are damaging that, because that's a very important part of your body, in your mind, that's keeping you from even knowing what it's like to live a little bit better, you know. So anyway, yeah. I know, yeah. What do we say to that? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, part of that is physical. The fried foods and all of that. There are other options here. There are some people here that come from the Andes where you said, you see that in their face, in their eyes, that there are other options available to people.
Happy, and they're not going to use guilt trip on you. They don't, because they are content and they're strong and you can see them for sure. Yeah. Exactly.
And then the other point that you made before where you said, you know, I tend to be, you know, I've practiced it a lot and I've become good at it, of setting these boundaries. Why that was so important for me is because I understood that this will be part of the way anyways.
Right.
It's like I can't get around that.
Right.
And this is when I talk or listen to a lot of people who are higher up than me in business, who are more advanced and actually have teams, right? I like to listen to that a lot. Leadership and delegation is a huge interest of mine. You will have people on your team and you will have these conversations. You can start by having these conversations in your family.
Right.
And then eventually you will have them in your team.
Right.
Because there's a certain person that sleeps with that other person in that other department, and there's like a huge problem, and somebody has a depression because of the same kind of family dynamics.
Yeah.
And then somebody doesn't feel heard or seen by you as the boss, and that feeds into their own wounding, and you got to know how to articulate that and how to manage that. That's why I said even more important than the physical strength, which what we were working on yesterday as a leader. If you don't have the articulation capacities to be able to lead people to the truth or to something that is more aligned with what's really real inside of them. I'm not saying I have the truth. I'm just can I point towards what's true for you? Like, what is really going on? Like, let's talk about that. What's really true inside of you? You feel that you're not being seen, you're not being heard, you felt a little bit unappreciated in your workplace. Is that really what's going on? If that's the truth, then that's the truth.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to get to.
Yeah.
Right? And in terms of the pineal gland awakening, I am very happy and excited to see your journey of figuring that out for people. It's a huge part of it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Yeah, it is a huge part of it. And we got about a minute left. So, yeah, man, this is pretty exciting what we're both doing. Florian is also really taking his business off to a whole nother degree. And shiny object syndrome. Next week we'll talk about that. Our hour's almost up, but next week let's definitely go into that. We didn't even get into that this week.
Sure.
But that is so interesting. The shiny object syndrome. And if you're working in AI and business and these things, and you see all these different options, and you think, this is it, this is going to be my way to success. And then you end up getting nowhere because you've just diluted into like 5 different things. Yeah. Or you're already a business owner and you've had some success, right? And however, you still get that shiny object, and you might be working on one thing, on an AI product or on your coaching product, and you you know, you might have some success, but then you get some success with it, and then you go over somewhere else because there's so much information every day at us. There's so many advertisements. There's so many different YouTube channels, different YouTube videos saying this is the way, this is the way, this is the way. So you help people to find one solution, one business, one product to one person. It's like that is genius in its simplicity, and that is so difficult to get to that simple point, to that one solution, because you know our egos are involved. There's a whole psychological thing, and we live in a territory now where like we've never been. Our ancestors did not pass that on. Maybe there was a lot of options at the supermarket, you know, with cereal, and you got to stand in the line like, but we're this is a whole different deal, man. So yeah, man, just wanted to point that out, and we'll talk to you guys next week. You'll have an amazing week. Peace.
Goodbye.